Today's episode is sponsored by Rev, the productivity powerhouse for content creators, journalists, market researchers, and more. Capture audio from anywhere, get AI-powered summaries and quotes, and leave security worries behind with Rev. Whether you're on the go or in the office, Rev's got you covered. Discover more at rev.com. Hi, I'm Kendall Kelton, and I'm your host today on The Rough Draft. Featuring honest conversations with folks from across the creative industry, The Rough Draft explores the creative process, tools, and resources used by some of the best in the business. From journalists to content creators and business leaders, we shed light on what it looks like to break into the industry, make mistakes, collaborate with others, and the essential tools that help us all along the way. I'm really excited about this week's guest, Josh Olenslager. As the Director of Publishing Operations at LinkedIn Learning, Josh helps distribute video courses to professionals all over the globe to help them learn new skills at their own pace. With an MFA in poetry and a career that blends creativity with tech, he's written a book of poetry and is currently working on a second musical. We had an inspiring chat about how creativity and professional worlds intersect, and I can't wait to share it with you. On today's episode, Josh discusses his role at LinkedIn Learning and how the platform and technology has evolved over time. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Kendall.
Hi. Thank you for coming on the show. You work for a company that I would assume almost every professional out there, at least in the US, knows and probably uses weekly, if not daily, LinkedIn. So I want to start things off by talking to you about what you actually do at LinkedIn.
Sure. I work in one of our businesses called LinkedIn Learning. And our one of our missions at LinkedIn Learning is to help professionals become more successful with their careers. So as part of that, we provide educational training in technology, business, and creative topic areas so that people can reskill. And in this age of AI, where everything is changing, reskilling is very important. So we take a lot of pride in the work that we do and the content that we publish to help people become more successful in their careers.
I want to dig into that, but first, how did you find yourself at LinkedIn?
I found myself at LinkedIn through various different acquisitions. I was in grad school in Wyoming working for a stock footage company.
Oh, wow.
At the age of the internet, the digital video internet. At the same time, YouTube, as an example, was being built as a platform. I worked for a stock footage company where we had contracts with various producers and content owners such as NBC News, National Geographic, the NCAA, all their sports libraries. And they had warehouses full of VHS tapes and other like analog media from, decades of production. And they were trying desperately to figure out how they could get this content digitized and into clouds. So I worked for a company where we were building private clouds essentially for these content owners. And then we had figured out a system for digitizing all of the things that they had on VHS tapes and digibetas and DVDs.
Yeah.
And then we were cutting that up and remarketing part of that as stock footage. So that's kind of like how I got my technical start. And then I found a little company in Southern California called lynda.com. It was an educational training company, an e-learning company. And they were trying to grow in online video distribution and online video delivery. And so I was able to find a position there that worked well, and come in and help this small business build into this enterprise powerhouse that LinkedIn eventually purchased in 2015.
So how does LinkedIn Learning, how have y'all adopted to that pace, especially given like the workforce and how much information they're having to absorb and how fast you're expected to train?
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance between one of our brand values is to create really high quality content compared with a Joe Schmo with a camera that's rambling on for a long time. And it's really hard to extract the value out of that content from a learning perspective. And so part of our value prop at LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning is we create and curate the highest value content. So it's simpler on the discovery side, right? So people can consume it more easily. I think initially the first thing we had to tackle when I was at lynda.com is really about like, how do we scale that quality of content production in a way that like we can maintain that value proposition of having high quality, easily accessible learning while we're continuing to grow that so that we can build our coverage, right? So that we can have more people access more quality materials that are going to help them in their career journeys. And so like, over the course of the many years that I've worked there and through LinkedIn and everything, right, we've had to continually figure out how do we scale this quality component at the same time that we need the content to come out faster. It's literally like every week something will change within the training, and keeping on top of that is a very complex thing that we have to manage. As a result, that ended up having us try to figure out like, how do we be more agile in our production methodologies, and how do we be more pointed and intelligent about our curation, so we understand like what do we need to update more urgently in order for people to be able to learn, to access that learning, and to stay on top of those things that they need to be successful.
So I kind of want to talk about are there any trends that you're seeing in the type of content or learning that people all over the world are trying to consume at the same time? Like, is it productivity in the workplace? Is it just trying to find a job? Like, are there certain topics that seem to be very prevalent right now?
LinkedIn is very focused on professionals in the workplace. And so, we try to figure out how do we engage people who aren't like you would think of as a traditional professional, right? Like, how do we engage people that are in the service marketplace as an example, so that they can find productivity content and maybe grow into a managerial role or something like that. And then we have the opposite side of the spectrum, right? Which is like, hey, I've got a CEO who needs to figure out, how to prepare for a meeting with an unexpected like new client, or how to think about business as a narrative, as an example. The trends that we're really seeing right now is a high consumption on what is AI content, how is that AI going to impact my business, or how do I need to think about implementing that AI so it can impact my business, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've heard a few people talking about this recently, where I think it's not that the fear of AI is necessarily gone, but it does seem like we're in more of the adoption and like, okay, that's not going to go away. How do we make it work? And it's kind of like history repeating itself in certain cycles. Like there was the internet at one point where everyone was like, whoa, what is this? And then it became a helpful tool and you adopted with it. And so I think we're at that stage, right? So are there things that your team in particular are doing with AI to kind of help nudge, where your audience needs to go at this stage?
Speaking on my behalf, not on LinkedIn's behalf, but the environment is incredibly wide open, right? And I think like if you can look at the investments across all of these different tech industries and the way people are thinking about how does AI, like trying to wrestle with that question, how is AI going to impact me personally? And also the business that I work for, and how do I prepare for that? Right. I think over time, just like we saw with everything else, we started in kind of this Wild West environment. And so, I think over time, like that's when we start to see the standardization, like there'll, obviously governments will start to regulate some of the things AI is able to do. We need to think about trust a lot in the AI world. And how do we make sure that we're building systems that people can trust, right? That they're they can understand, they can trust, and they can provide value, right? So we're kind of in this like nebulous territory of being able to try to work through all of these complex questions, whether they're ethical, whether they're legal, or whether they're just like value propositions, and are they going to be productive, right?
I'd love to actually talk about your team for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Your current role involves like leading and shaping large teams. So how do you keep things creative and exciting amongst like the chaos of the market?
Sure. So I don't think I actually said this earlier, but I lead all of the publication for LinkedIn Learning. So all of the courses that end up on LinkedIn Learning, my team handles those, and we do the packaging preparation so that we can distribute those. As part of that, it's a very technical function rather than a creative function in that way. But we work for a creative house, right? Like we work for a house where we have video directors and we have graphics artists and we have other people that are applying their creative energies in order to build this great product that we can distribute. The things that I'm doing to encourage my team on that creative front is like actually leaning into the human side of it, right? Leaning into the community around it so that we don't get caught up in this environment of, oh, the AI is going to take over some of the transactional pieces of my role, which allows me just to kind of like put my feet up on the desk. Actually, what that allows me to do is engage more fully with the creative community around me.
Yeah.
And being able to engage in that creative community at a deeper level, right, can generate new brainstorming, new ideas, new creative energies, and kind of get back to like that synergistic, the synergistic ideal that often we think about, when we're saying like, as a poet, I want to be part of a writing group, even though like some of the other folks in the writing group we're at different levels and we have different ideas.
Well, I actually think that's a great transition for us. I want to, though, switch gears to talking about your creative process, because you are somebody who has a creative side hustle. And many people may find it difficult to balance a demanding corporate job with their personal creative ambitions. But you seem to have found that sweet spot. Or at least from the outside, it seems like you have found that sweet spot. So we'll talk about that on our next episode.
Sounds good.
Well, that's it for today's episode of The Rough Draft. Be sure to rate and subscribe in order to stay up to date with the latest episodes, and visit rev.com/podcasts for even more content. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of The Rough Draft.